So we left off with Twisted Metal Small Brawl, which was released on the PlayStation 1 in November of 2001. But just 6 months earlier, a beast was born on the PlayStation's successor, the PlayStation 2. A game developed by the same company that made Twisted Metal Small Brawl, but this was quite the different game. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Twisted Metal Black. After the not-so-popular 989 Studios Twisted Metal titles, Sony and Incognito Entertainment, comprised of former single-track employees, joined forces once again to bring forth a new Twisted Metal for the PlayStation 2. With a name like Twisted Metal Black, you can bet that this is a very dark game, from the storyline to the levels and graphics. This game is the darkest the series had seen at the time. There are a total of 15 selectable vehicles in the game, 5 of which need to be unlocked. And unlike previous titles, you don't actually need to beat certain levels or use passwords to unlock vehicles. You instead need to locate where they're hidden within certain levels. This is actually pretty cool and really takes some searching if you're trying to find them without having any idea of where they actually are. Whereas previous titles had a bit of humorous elements to them, this game takes itself very seriously, and you can tell by the character selection. There are no pizza delivery boys or grandmas driving monster trucks here, just a bunch of mentally unstable, violent, and undead lunatics. So crazy, in fact, that most of the characters' stories start out in an insane asylum. Calypso promises a handsome reward if they win his tournament, and they just kind of leave like they own the place. This was my first PS2 game, and I remember being extremely impressed by the cutscenes. These are dark, gritty, and look great, not to mention they feature fantastic voice acting.
Calypso said if I won the game, I'd get a chance to undo the big mistake that was eating at my soul. Redemption. That's a big thing to offer a man without a hope in hell.
I'll have to admit this is not my favorite Twisted Metal game, as it's a little too dark and gloomy for me, and I really like that light-hearted, comic-y feel that Twisted Metal 2 had. Now, with that being said, this is a very good game, and for me that's mostly due to gameplay. It's very polished here. The control scheme has pretty much returned to what we knew from the first few titles. Only just like in Twisted Metal 4, Turbo does not have an exclusive button, as it's once again used by double tapping the gas button. Other than that, this feels very familiar and works well, though being able to land upside down has returned here, only this time instead of a respawn in place, you have to press either left or right to flip your vehicle back over. But this doesn't happen very often at all, and usually only with the taller vehicles. The weapon system that we've grown to love is still here in the same fashion, only this time they've added a few new items for your arsenal. New weapons include gas cans, which are similar to the napalm attacks seen in previous titles, as well as ricochets being changed from the typical bombs that we've known up to this point. They've also put quite a bit of thought into special moves. I have to say, I'm still impressed every time I see Sweet Tooth transform into this evil-looking robot and just start chucking rockets at enemies. These weapons are still scattered throughout the levels and can be picked up by driving through them. Health pickups also return in the form of standard pickups that replenish a small percentage of health, and also in the form of charging stations that had not been seen since the first game in the series. These charging stations replenish one's health to 100%. Levels range anywhere from smaller to huge, but regardless of size, they didn't skimp on any details. The suburbs level is definitely one of the game's best. This stage is huge and features hills filled with houses, churches, supermarkets, and even an amusement park with a destructible Ferris wheel. Oh, and after that poor excuse for a rooftop level from Twisted Metal 3, we finally get a rooftop stage worthy of appearing in a Twisted Metal game. This level is absolutely fantastic. Though extremely dark, this game features very sharp and impressive graphics for the time. The creators actually went on record stating that they were extremely excited to work with the new hardware so that they could create graphics that they couldn't achieve on the previous console. The music here is comprised of very intense action movie style scores with lots of orchestra and brass. I like that they strayed from the licensed music that had been featured in the last two games, but I would have liked to hear some more heavy stuff in here. Other than that, I have no complaints. The action is brought to life with vivid sounds that don't disappoint. Midway through the game, you'll take on a familiar face in Minion, though he may not be recognizable as he now mans a big gas tanker in this installment instead of his typical tank. In order to defeat him, you'll have to destroy the shield that protects his truck. In order to do this, you'll have to shoot out each of the panels on his vehicle. Once this is completed, you can proceed to defeat Minion, if he doesn't kill you first. After this, you'll be greeted with another of the game's cutscenes, which reveals more of your player's storyline. The first time I played to this point, I was actually a little bit confused. I thought I had beaten the game as the cutscene appeared to be an ending to me. The final boss of the game is a helicopter. Yes, a helicopter. Now, I should have seen it coming when I was younger, as Twisted Metal is known for pushing the envelope with boss battles. But this helicopter, which goes by the name of Warhawk, just isn't enough, as you have to destroy numerous tankers that resemble Minion quite a bit, by the way. And you can't even attack Warhawk until these tankers are destroyed. And when it does come time to attack Warhawk, it can tend to be a bit difficult, you know, with him being in the air and all. But once you defeat Warhawk, you'll be greeted with your much-earned ending sequence, and these, just like other cutscenes in the game, do not disappoint. These are done so well and really tell the stories of these psychotic characters. In retrospect, I knew the first time I played this game that I was playing a great game. I had only wished they went another direction with the theme. These days, I feel the game was an important step in the Twisted Metal series, and I couldn't imagine the series without it. There were a few canceled sequels in the years that followed Twisted Metal Black, and we wouldn't see a true home console release until 2012. Well, there was Twisted Metal Head On, which was a PSP game that was later re-released on the PS2. Head On takes place after the events of Twisted Metal 2, and if you've been paying attention, you'd know that this one is probably right up my alley. In fact, this game is one of my favorites without a doubt, so let's take a look at it. This is Twisted Metal Head On Extra Twisted Edition on the PlayStation 2. Now let's start with the game's intro. If I wouldn't know any better, it looks like I'm about to play a Twisted Metal 2 remake or something, right down to the scenes in the Paris stage. And this was done with a cel-shaded effect, and I really like the way this video looks. In keeping with the Twisted Metal 2 feel, we see the return of every single vehicle from the 1996 release, with the exception of Minion, which is a shame, as I would have loved to see him here. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't absolutely love the character selection here. The game may visually resemble Twisted Metal 2, but it plays a lot like Black. Though I've noticed that if it is possible to flip upside down, it has never happened to me, so it's not very likely. The gameplay feels really solid, though. It's not difficult to control, which is something that is usually not said about the early titles in the series. The weapons and hub are almost identical to what we got in Twisted Metal Black, though I noticed that the ricochet weapon has returned to being in the shape of bombs, and specials have been simplified a bit compared to Black. Another thing that made a return were the portals, and these resemble the portals from Twisted Metal 2 that you had to drive over. Some of these lead to other portions of levels, while others can actually lead you to mini-games. And some of these mini-games make sense, like seeing how many Sweet Tooth heads you can destroy within the time limit, but other levels just confused me a bit as they turned a Twisted Metal game into a platformer. Not to say they aren't fun, they're just different, and my biggest gripe about the entire game has got to be the sound the game makes when your health is low. I mean, this gets old extremely fast.
Health is low. No health.
And while we're on the topic of sound, let's talk a bit about the game's soundtrack. It is a little bit disappointing. It's not licensed music, nor is it that classic Twisted Metal sound. It's just kind of there, and not really memorable. There are a few tracks that I can get into a bit, but most of it is just fast-paced dance rock hybrid type of music. The level designs here are fantastic. It takes the series back to its roots of touring actual cities and countries instead of a fictitious world, and I like that. The game features areas that we've already seen in Twisted Metal 2 like LA and Paris, and if you enjoyed blowing up the Eiffel Tower to reveal the rooftop access in Twisted Metal 2, well, you're in luck because it returns here. And I have to say, even though this level isn't identical to the classic version, I felt extreme amounts of nostalgia while playing it. There's even a few locations that we saw in Twisted Metal 3, like Egypt, complete with hidden tombs, as well as the Tokyo rooftops. If you've seen my other video on the Twisted Metal series, then you know I don't care much for how they portrayed the rooftops of Tokyo in the third game. Well, here, I'll have to say they did a mighty fine job. It's still not my favorite rooftop level in the series, but it's a lot better than the other of the same name. With graphics that are colorful, levels that are bright and lively, and an art style that is right up my alley, there are also some shortcomings. Now, this is a late PS2 title, and I feel it could have looked a bit better. I know it's a port of a PSP game, and I understand that they probably didn't want to overhaul the whole graphical presentation for a re-release, but it would have been nice to get a little bit more. But then again, Twisted Metal has never really been known for incredible graphical feats. Chances are, if you've ever played Twisted Metal 2, you're familiar with Darktooth. Well, he's back to destroy you again, and he's tough as nails again, but this time he's unlockable, so you can unleash your own havoc in this monstrous black ice cream truck. And don't worry, this time around, you don't have to fight his head or anything like that. Nope, instead, you fight a building that morphs into a vehicle. A building. What is even going on here? To top things off, his name is Tower Tooth. After you defeat this monstrosity, you'll be greeted by a much older looking Calypso, and once again as the winner of his tournament, you're granted any wish you desire. And once again, Calypso takes your wish way too literal, and this usually results in your sudden demise. They did these endings a lot like the ones from Twisted Metal 2. They feature a very comic book style, and these make me feel right at home. This game is a really fun addition to the series. It's a throwback to the first few games in the series, and that is perfectly alright with me. But this isn't all you get when you purchase this game. There are some very interesting behind-the-scene videos where the creators and developers from Singletrack and Incognito talk about creating the first two games in the series.
I said, I'm going to start looking for a new job tomorrow because they're going to fire me because this is a disaster. And It turned out not to be. It turned out that we ended up, and I was stunned because somebody told me, "Oh, you guys got Game of the Year," and I'm like, "What are you talking about, right?" And then it turns out, and I won't mention the magazine because I don't think legally we can, but we ended up getting Game of the Year from the most prestigious game magazine that was out at the time, and I was just, it was amazing that it all actually worked. I mean, this was the first big game I had ever done. It was the first game these guys in Utah had ever made. And we ended up with a game that a lot of people really, really loved, to the point that we were getting these major awards. And so it all worked out. I have no clue how. Maybe we all just got really lucky. I don't know. But it was cool.
They also discussed their feelings about the games that were developed by 989 Studios.
To me, they weren't really Twisted Metal, because they didn't have the same feel at all.
When they said that the guys from Utah weren't going to be doing Twisted 3, it was going to be the guys in San Diego, I was like, all right, I'll help them out if I can, but it's not that I didn't care, like, screw Twisted Metal, I don't care, but I had sort of moved on, so it didn't really bother me. It only bothered me once the games came out.
Also included in the game are those now infamous ending movies that were removed from the original 1995 release.
That was anticlimactic.
Oh my God.
Twisted Metal Harbor City was a game that was being developed as a direct sequel to Black. The game was never actually completed, but the levels they did finish are featured here as fully playable stages. This is actually pretty cool, and I really wish this game would have been finished and released. One aspect of the game was to feature on-foot stages, and though it was still early on in development when the game was canceled, you can actually explore this on-foot world as Sweet Tooth. There's nothing really to do but to walk around and collect Sweet Tooth heads, which reveal fun facts about the series. Though this is very basic and far from finished, it's cool to check it out. We're pretty much playing a beta version Twisted Metal game here. Not only do you get a great Twisted Metal game that was pretty much designed for nostalgic reasons, but you get a bunch of extras too, and as of 2015, you can still find this title on Amazon brand new for like $30, and that's a steal. If you even just kind of enjoy Twisted Metal, you should definitely check this game out. In fact, both of these games should be in your collection. With the first 5 games on the original PlayStation, it's a shame that we only got 2 on the PS2. Just 2 in a 7-year span. I mean, that just sucks, man. There was one more game that would be released in the series, but we'll save that for another video, another time. Until then, thanks for joining me. Please like the video, subscribe. I'm out of here.
It's good to be back.